Ethan Ward was the kind of man whose name alone could silence a crowded room. Every magazine, every business blog, every leadership forum praised him as the visionary CEO who transformed a struggling corporation into an empire built on sleek innovation and ruthless efficiency. Cameras loved him, employees idolized him, and shareholders trusted every word he spoke. In the polished glass towers of the corporate world, Ethan was the shining example of success, the man who always smiled perfectly for the press, always delivered flawless speeches, and always seemed to have life under complete control. The public saw charm, elegance, power, and a brilliance that appeared impossible to crack. Beside him, though rarely acknowledged, stood Maya, his pregnant wife, quiet and graceful, carrying herself with a softness that people often mistook for fragility. She was the kind of woman who entered a room without demanding attention, yet her presence had an unspoken strength that seemed to settle into the air. She never corrected people who assumed she knew little about business, never challenged those who dismissed her as merely the CEO's wife, and never explained herself to those who whispered that Ethan had married beneath his status. Her calm eyes and gentle demeanor made her easy to underestimate, and almost everyone did. In the glittering world Ethan ruled, where every handshake was strategic and every smile part of a carefully crafted image, cracks were beginning to appear, cracks that only someone standing very close could see. And Maya, silent and observant, saw everything. Behind the locked doors of their luxurious penthouse, the reality of Ethan and Maya's marriage was far from the perfect image the world admired. Ethan had grown colder with each passing month, slipping into a routine of late-night meetings, unanswered calls, and dismissive gestures. He barely looked at Maya anymore, offering only a quick nod or a curt question about her doctor appointments before disappearing into his office or out the door. When she tried to talk to him, about the baby kicking, about her fears, about anything that once connected them, he brushed her off with the same rehearsed line, "I'm busy, Maya. You wouldn't understand." His arrogance had sharpened recently, cutting through even the gentlest of her attempts to keep peace. When she set the table for dinner, he texted that he wasn't coming home. When she waited up for him, he arrived smelling of expensive cologne and irritation, snapping that she was being overly emotional. Sometimes, his disrespect was so open it left her standing speechless, holding her stomach where their unborn child shifted quietly within her, sensing her distress. Maya carried their first child with hope, but the loneliness wrapped itself around her every night like a cold blanket. She walked through the penthouse halls feeling more like a polite guest than a wife. She wondered when Ethan had stopped seeing her, when she had become invisible to him, a mere accessory beside his rising fame. What Ethan didn't know, or chose not to know, was that Maya noticed the shift behind his cruelty. There was something he was hiding, something he believed gave him complete power over her. Deep down, Ethan was convinced Maya had no money, no influence, no leverage. In his mind, she was dependent on him in every way, and that belief was the root of his growing boldness. He thought she could never fight back. He had no idea how wrong he was. The buzz around the upcoming board meeting was louder than anything the company had experienced in years. Ethan had hinted for weeks that he was preparing a transformative announcement, something bold enough to reshape the future of the corporation and cement his legacy as the greatest CEO the company had ever seen. Behind closed doors, he practiced his speech with a self-satisfied grin, rehearsing the dramatic pauses, the confident smirks, the visionary language he knew the shareholders adored. This merger, he believed, would showcase his brilliance and usher in what he called a new leadership direction, a phrase he repeated so often that even the board members began echoing it blindly. But the real reason Ethan was excited, almost giddy, had nothing to do with the merger's potential. What thrilled him most was the opportunity he had crafted within the presentation, a subtle but public blow aimed directly at Maya. The moment he learned she would attend the meeting, after he personally insisted she come, he began preparing lines that would light-heartedly expose her supposed ignorance of business, her sweet but naive nature, and her emotional instability due to pregnancy. He imagined the room chuckling along with him, reinforcing his belief that Maya belonged nowhere near his world of power. He ensured her invitation was sent with unnecessary formality, as if he were doing her a charitable favor. "You should be there," he told her with a thin smile, "even if you won't understand most of it." His tone dripped with condescension, fully expecting her to sit quietly in the back, humiliated and powerless. What Ethan didn't realize was that Maya had already sensed the trap. She knew Ethan too well, the smug uplift of his eyebrow, the shift in his voice when he thought he had outmaneuvered someone, the way he avoided her eyes whenever he had a secret to protect. She felt the tension humming beneath his polished politeness. So while he practiced the moment he would embarrass her, Maya prepared for a very different moment. One Ethan couldn't predict, couldn't control, and certainly couldn't recover from. She carried not just their unborn child, but knowledge powerful enough to flip Ethan's entire world upside down. Maya had not always lived in Ethan's shadow. Long before she met him, she grew up in a quiet world far removed from the noise of public admiration and corporate theatrics. Her father, a reclusive billionaire investor known in financial circles only by whispered reputation, had raised her with a philosophy very different from the flashy wealth Ethan worshipped. Power works best, he always told her, when people don't realize you have it. Under his guidance, Maya learned early how to read balance sheets, understand market movements, and study the motivations behind every smile and handshake. But just as importantly, she learned how to disappear, how to blend into a room, how to let others underestimate her, how to quietly observe until she knew exactly where every strength and weakness lay. When her father passed away, he left behind not just memories, but a labyrinth of investments, assets, and shell companies carefully structured over decades. To the world, these companies were small, disconnected entities. Only Maya knew the truth. She was their sole inheritor. Through them, she controlled vast investments, shares in corporations, voting power spread across industries, influence hidden behind neutral names that drew no attention. It was wealth designed to be invisible, and she honored her father's lesson by keeping it that way. When she married Ethan, she never revealed the full extent of her inheritance. At first, she thought his attraction was genuine, that he admired her kindness and calm nature. But over the years, as he grew more arrogant and dismissive, Maya began to see the truth. Ethan behaved the way men do when they think they hold all the power. He spoke to her as if she were financially helpless, emotionally dependent, and intellectually inferior. So she watched him, patiently, silently. She noticed the way he puffed up when people praised him, how he dismissed anyone who challenged his authority, how he mistook her silence for weakness. All the while, she carried her father's teachings like a shield, preparing for the day those hidden shell companies would become the key to exposing Ethan's greatest miscalculation. Lana Reeves had perfected the art of stepping just close enough to Ethan to appear professional while staying close enough to fuel rumors. As the company's PR director, she was sharp, ambitious, and always dressed in sleek confidence. Her presence beside Ethan during meetings, press events, and late-night strategy sessions became so common that employees no longer pretended not to notice. Whispers moved silently through hallways, over coffee machines, and inside private group chats. Ethan was having an affair, and the woman standing too comfortably at his side was the reason. The board members tried to mask their unease, but even they exchanged meaningful glances whenever Lana leaned into Ethan's ear or laughed a bit too brightly at his comments. They suspected it, sensed it, but no one dared confront him. Ethan Ward was, after all, the golden CEO. Pointing out his flaws required courage no one yet possessed. Through all of this, Maya remained silent. She said nothing when Ethan came home smelling of Lana's perfume. She said nothing when employees stiffened in awkward guilt upon seeing her in the elevator. She said nothing even when Lana began speaking about future company directions as if she were Ethan's equal. Silence was her armor, and everyone mistook it for ignorance. Lana, emboldened by Ethan's attention, began pushing him harder. She whispered that he deserved better than a quiet, unambitious wife who didn't belong in his world. She fed his ego with the idea that Maya was holding him back, that the company would flourish if he were free. Slowly, she planted the poisonous belief that he no longer needed Maya at all, that replacing her publicly would prove his dominance. And Ethan, blinded by arrogance and flattery, believed every word. The auditorium buzzed with a charged energy that made the air feel thick. Rows of plush seats filled quickly as shareholders, analysts, and high-ranking executives streamed in, murmuring about the rumored historic announcement Ethan Ward was expected to deliver. Large screens glowed with the company's logo, camera crews adjusted their lenses, and reporters positioned themselves strategically, eager to capture the perfect angle of the celebrated CEO. It was the type of event where every breath felt recorded, every glance scrutinized, every whisper magnified. When Ethan finally entered, a ripple moved across the room. He walked with the practiced stride of a man convinced of his own brilliance, shoulders straight, chin slightly raised. The applause was immediate, loud, and rehearsed, exactly the way he liked it. Behind him, Lana followed with a smirk tugging at her lips, her eyes scanning the room as though she were already part of the leadership being celebrated. She stood close enough to Ethan to signal importance but far enough to maintain plausible professionalism. Their chemistry was obvious. The cameras caught every moment. Ethan soaked in the attention, waving slightly as if he were entering a gala instead of a corporate meeting. He exchanged handshakes with key board members, each one offering tight smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. The tension crept quietly beneath the surface, unspoken but undeniable. They sensed something off, but no one dared articulate it. Minutes later, Maya stepped into the auditorium. She didn't command applause or cameras. She simply walked in, carrying her pregnancy with quiet dignity, her movements gentle yet assured. She wore a simple dress, elegant but understated, so opposite of Lana's bold presence that most people barely noticed her arrival. A few employees offered awkward nods, others looked away quickly, and many didn't acknowledge her at all. She made her way to a seat near the front, settling in with calm poise. She didn't fidget, didn't shift nervously, didn't show even a hint of discomfort. While the entire room fixed their attention on Ethan, Maya watched him silently, her expression unreadable. She saw every detail, every arrogance-soaked smile, every self-satisfied gesture, aware that none of them knew she was about to change everything. Ethan took the stage with theatrical confidence, tapping the microphone as the room hushed. He flashed the crowd a winning smile, one he had rehearsed too many times, before beginning his presentation. The first few minutes were smooth, market projections, merger highlights, bold promises about the company's future. The shareholders nodded, impressed. But then Ethan drifted from the teleprompter, energized by the attention, emboldened by Lana's approving smirk from the front row. "And of course," he said lightly, "not everyone understands big decisions like these. Especially emotional pregnant women." The room froze. A ripple of surprise spread across the audience, heads turning instinctively toward Maya. Ethan chuckled as if he had shared a charming joke, but no one laughed. His eyes flicked toward his wife, clearly expecting her to shrink in embarrassment. Instead, she remained still, expression serene. But Ethan wasn't done. The silence didn't register as warning, it encouraged him. He leaned casually on the podium, voice dripping with careless arrogance. "Some people," he continued, "just aren't cut out for the pressures of corporate life. My wife, bless her heart, is a perfect example. She's a non-business-minded liability. Sweet, but naive." A sharp gasp tore through the room. Cameras clicked instantly, reporters' fingers flying across keyboards. Even the board members exchanged horrified looks. Lana shifted uncomfortably, realizing Ethan had pushed far past any line of discretion. Ethan, intoxicated by his own bravado, kept going. "Honestly," he added with a sigh, "if I had known how complicated things would get, I might have made different personal choices." His meaning was unmistakable. He was implying regret over his marriage, regret over the woman carrying his child. A deeper silence settled over the room, heavy and electric. People stared at Maya, expecting tears, outrage, some visible crack in her composure. But she simply folded her hands gently over her stomach, her breathing calm, her posture unshaken. Her stillness unnerved the room more than any outburst could have. There was something in her eyes, not hurt, not anger, but a quiet certainty, as if she were watching a man unknowingly seal his own fate. And Ethan, blinded by arrogance, had no idea his humiliation attempt had just triggered the downfall he never saw coming. Maya rose slowly from her seat, the fabric of her dress settling softly around her as the entire auditorium seemed to inhale at once. She didn't rush, didn't stumble, didn't show the slightest sign of the emotional volatility Ethan had just mocked. Instead, she placed one steady hand on the armrest, the other on her belly, and walked toward the stage with the grace of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Every camera swung toward her. Every whisper died instantly. Ethan's confident smile faltered when he saw her approaching. "Maya, this really isn't." She walked past him without acknowledging his voice. She turned to the audience, her posture perfect, her expression calm and unthreatened. When she reached the microphone, her fingers did not tremble. The room waited. "I apologize for the interruption," she began softly, her voice clear enough to slice through the tension. "But since I've been mentioned several times, I think it's only fair I address a few things." A murmur spread, reporters leaning forward eagerly. Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside her, whispering harshly, "Maya, sit down." She didn't. Instead, she opened the folder she had brought with her. Thick, organized, filled with documents that looked decidedly serious. "I may appear uninvolved in business," she continued, "but it seems necessary to clarify that the companies listed here," she held up a stack of papers, "are all registered under my name." The board members squinted as she placed the documents on the podium, flipping them one by one to reveal shareholder certificates, transfer records, investment trails. Each logo, each corporate seal, was instantly recognizable. "These shell companies," Maya said, her voice steady, "collectively own 60% of Ward Global Holdings." Silence crashed over the room. A few people gasped audibly. One board member's pen fell from his hand. The legal counsel blinked twice, stunned. Ethan went pale, so pale it looked as if the life had drained straight out of him. "That's impossible," he whispered hoarsely. "You don't have that kind of power." Maya finished gently, turning her eyes toward him for the first time. "Influence. Resources." His jaw tightened, but he had no words. She continued, addressing the room. "I have full voting power. Full authority over major decisions. Full control over the outcome of this merger and any leadership changes being proposed." The weight of her revelation settled heavily, but it wasn't fear that filled the auditorium, it was awe. Investors leaned forward, impressed not only by the magnitude of her ownership but by the calm confidence with which she presented it. One by one, applause began to break out, soft at first, then rising, then sweeping across the room in a wave of approval. The board members exchanged nods, several even standing. They weren't applauding just the ownership. They were applauding her composure, her intelligence, her fairness in revealing the truth with dignity instead of anger. And as the cameras flashed wildly, capturing her standing tall beside a crumbling Ethan Ward, everyone in that auditorium understood. The power had shifted completely, irreversibly. Maya wasn't the liability Ethan tried to paint her as. She was the majority owner, and the room now belonged to her. The fallout happened faster than Ethan could comprehend. The moment Maya's documents were verified, something that took mere minutes, given the legal team's frantic efficiency, the board members shifted into action with a level of seriousness Ethan had never imagined would be directed at him. For years he had been untouchable, the golden figurehead of the company. But now, stripped bare of the power he thought he controlled, he looked small and shaken. The chairman cleared his throat, voice steady but firm. "Given the confirmed majority ownership and the events witnessed today, I motion for Ethan Ward to be removed from all decision-making responsibilities effective immediately." Hands went up across the table, one after another, without hesitation. Even those who once clung loyally to Ethan's influence raised their hands, eager to distance themselves from the embarrassment he had just inflicted on the corporation. Cameras caught his stunned expression as the motion passed unanimously. The vote to remove him as CEO followed moments later, sweeping through the room with a decisive finality that left him swallowing back disbelief. Meanwhile, whispers about Lana spread like wildfire. Reporters replayed clips showing her proximity to Ethan, the knowing look she exchanged with him, the way she had stood behind him moments earlier with smug confidence. Board members demanded answers, pulling her aside with stern faces. Lana tried to maintain composure, but her voice shook as they questioned her involvement in Ethan's decisions, her influence on company communication, and her relationship with the CEO. Security approached discreetly, and within minutes she was escorted out, her eyes flashing with humiliation and thinly veiled rage. She didn't dare look back at Ethan, who couldn't even lift his gaze to meet hers. After the meeting, Ethan found Maya alone in a quiet hallway. His earlier arrogance had vanished completely. He reached for her arm, voice cracking. Maya, please, you can't let them do this. You know me. I made mistakes, but you can fix this. We're married. She stepped back, her expression as calm as it had been on stage. Not hateful. Not vindictive. Simply empty of the fear she once held. You chose your actions, she said softly. And now you're living their consequences. He opened his mouth to argue, to beg, but she turned away before he could speak another word. Her silence was final, more final than any dismissal the board had issued. For the first time in his life, Ethan Ward stood powerless, watching the woman he underestimated walk away with everything he thought he owned. In the days that followed, the company shifted into a steady, purposeful rhythm under Maya's quiet leadership. There was no grand announcement, no boastful press conference, no dramatic display of power. Instead, the board met privately, reviewed the documentation again, and cast their votes with clear confidence. By unanimous decision, Maya was appointed chairwoman of the company, an outcome that stunned the public but felt like a natural correction inside the boardroom. She accepted the role with the same calm assurance she had shown on stage, thanking them not with flowery promises but with a simple, firm commitment to responsibility. Her first act was to appoint a group of seasoned executives to form the new CEO team, individuals chosen for integrity, experience, and loyalty to the company rather than to any one individual. They were professionals who understood that leadership required more than charisma. It required stability, ethics, and vision. With Maya guiding the strategic direction, the new team moved quickly to restore order. The merger was re-evaluated with transparency, communication lines reopened, and every department was reassured that their work mattered. Employees who once walked on eggshells under Ethan's volatile rule now found themselves working in an environment grounded in respect. The shift was subtle but profound. Tensions eased, productivity rose, and the company's reputation began to recover almost immediately. Maya didn't hover or micromanage. She listened, observed, and made decisions rooted in logic rather than ego. Investors who had arrived at the shareholders' meeting expecting chaos instead found themselves praising the clarity and steadiness she brought to the table. Slowly, admiration replaced underestimation. Maya had stepped into the light not with loud declarations, but with a steady presence that proved far more powerful. And as the company stabilized, people began to understand. She had been the backbone all along, simply choosing the right moment to reveal her strength. Ethan made one final attempt to regain what he had lost. He waited for Maya in the parking garage late one evening, leaning against the concrete pillar with a defeated slump to his shoulders. When she approached, he straightened quickly, desperation flickering across his face. She didn't flinch. She simply watched him with the same unreadable calm she had mastered over years of being ignored. Maya, he whispered, stepping forward. Please, just think of our family. Think of what we were. We can fix this. I know I messed up, but you don't have to destroy everything. We have a child coming. Don't do this. His voice cracked on the last sentence, but she did not soften. She had spent too many nights trying to hold together a marriage he had treated carelessly, too many mornings waking up alone while he chased admiration elsewhere. Now he wanted her to forget all of it simply because his world had crumbled. She shook her head slowly, her hand resting gently over her stomach. I'm thinking of our family, she replied, her voice steady. That's why I'm choosing peace. She walked past him without looking back. And Ethan finally understood. She wasn't saving him anymore, she was saving herself. Maya raised her child in a world that finally felt steady, honest, and safe. Gone were the nights spent waiting for footsteps that never came, the anxious silence that filled the penthouse, the weight of being treated like an afterthought. In their place was a warm home lit with gentleness, where her baby grew surrounded not by chaos, but by dignity. Maya built a life defined not by luxury, but by peace. Quiet mornings with soft music, afternoons filled with laughter, and evenings where she read stories to a child who knew only love. She wanted her child to grow up understanding strength not as dominance, but as grace. Outside her personal life, her rise became a story the world couldn't ignore. Reporters who once glanced past her now wrote headlines calling her a symbol of underestimated intelligence, proof that true power often hides in silence until the right moment to speak arrives. Articles praised her composure at the shareholders' meeting, the fairness of her decisions, and the unexpected revelation that she had been the majority owner all along. They called her the invisible heiress who redefined leadership, a woman who didn't need theatrics or ego to command respect. Under her guidance, the company flourished. Departments once strained under Ethan's impulsive leadership found new life in the open, collaborative culture she encouraged. Investors marveled at the transparency she brought, the strategic patience she displayed, and the steady financial growth that followed. Employees no longer feared sudden firings or emotional outbursts, they trusted the stability she represented. Decisions were deliberate, ethical, and focused on long-term progress. Slowly, the corporation rebuilt its reputation, not on the back of flashy promises, but on consistent integrity. Maya often found herself reflecting on the past, but never with bitterness. Bitterness belonged to those who felt powerless, and she had reclaimed every piece of her strength. Instead, she looked back with quiet victory, grateful for the lessons wrapped inside the pain. Ethan's betrayal, his arrogance, the humiliation he attempted, all of it had pushed her to step into the power she once chose to hide. She realized she hadn't defeated Ethan out of revenge, she had simply stopped allowing herself to be diminished. And in doing so, she discovered the version of herself her father had always believed she could be. As she held her child close one evening, watching the sun sink beyond the city skyline she now quietly ruled, Maya felt something she had never felt before, complete, unshakable peace. She had risen, not loudly, but undeniably. And the world would never underestimate her again.